I totally forgot about that. I used to watch that. That's where she... Bipolar disorder is a very variable illness. Everyone has their own journey, own prognosis with it. Some people have more episodes of depression than mania. Some people just have manic episodes. Some people have a mix of both. But it's a very serious disorder, and the risk of suicide is quite high, and lithium is absolutely a life-saving treatment for it. But we really don't know why it's happening. So when I look through the different theories on why bipolar disorder is going on, there's different theories around the transcellular proteins on neurons and intracellular secondary messengers being abnormal, but it's not kind of well established yet, and likely it'll be a heterogeneous disorder with different subtypes. But whatever the case, it is very disabling condition that needs to be treated. And yes, there's bipolar 1 and 2. 1 is with mania, 2 is with hypomania, and hypomania being a less intense version of a mania. But I think the most helpful distinction isn't 1 and 2, but whether someone develops psychosis or not. So mania with psychosis or depression with psychosis. Anyway, all that to say that bipolar is a serious condition, and today we're going to be looking at some footage of Selena Gomez talking about her bipolar disorder. I think when celebrities talk about their mental illnesses, it is incredibly useful because it can happen to any one of us, and it reminds me that I could develop bipolar, I could develop schizophrenia. You know, it can happen to anyone. It can happen to you and it can happen to me. And that's why we all have to stay humble and, be very aware to reduce stigma wherever we can, because it can happen to us. And be grateful, when it's not happening, because, it's sometimes it's just bloody bad luck. If you're new here, a very warm welcome. My name's Dr. Sil. I'm a junior doctor from Australia, and I'm training to become a psychiatrist. And in my free time, I make mental health education videos. I do reactions to TV shows, music videos, and sometimes celebrities reflecting on their mental health. So if that sounds good, let's get into it.
Selena Gomez, an actress, philanthropist, and pop star with chart-topping hits like Lose You to Love Me.
I needed to lose you to love me. Yeah, you broke up with me over text message.
At just 13, the Texan landed a breakout role on the Disney Channel's Wizards of Waverly Place.
I have to see this through.
I totally forgot about that. I used to watch that. That's where that was her breakout role.
Now 30, she's starring with legends Steve Martin and Martin Short.
We have two options. I slap you across the face, or we just skip to the part where you say, "Thanks, kid. That was tough to hear."
Not the slapping one.
On Hulu's hit comedy, Only Murders in the Building.
I have watched that. That's very good.
Despite her rise to fame and fortune, Selena had a secret.
Selena Gomez
was diagnosed with lupus, depression, and anxiety.
She had a mental breakdown.
I didn't realize she had lupus. Systemic lupus erythematosus is a systemic autoimmune condition. It affects every part of your body, basically. It can affect your skin. Name an organ, it can affect it. It's an autoimmune process, so it just depends where the immune system is targeting. But it can also affect the brain. So people can develop a psychosis with SLE where your immune system attacks your brain, and it can affect the parts of the brain that control your reality testing and can result in a psychosis. The tricky thing is you have to treat it with steroids, and steroids can also worsen mental state. There's other treatments for it as well, but a lot of steroid-based medications can cause poor sleep and worsen people's mental state. So it's very tricky.
No one cares about what you're doing. It's about who I am. Being okay with where I am. I am grateful to be alive.
Alec Kashishian, who directed Madonna's revealing film Truth or Dare, now partnering with Selena in the new Apple TV Plus documentary, Selena Gomez, My Mind and Me.
My mind and me.
Shot over 6 turbulent years,
But what good is having a song if I was too scared to sing it?
including a stay in a mental hospital.
When I first got out, I didn't know how I'd cope with my diagnosis. What if it happened again? What if the next time I didn't come back?
Her inner turmoil laid bare.
She's the first to admit, she's broken.
What do you think motivated her to reveal all of this?
I still think she feels discomfort about the level of vulnerability that she's given and exposing all these parts of her. But that is transcended by her, I think, deep desire to try to make a difference in someone else's life. She talks about that in the film, where she says, sometimes I don't want to be famous, I don't want any of this stuff, but I know if I'm here, I have to use it for good.
I spoke to Selena and her mother earlier this year after bravely sharing her diagnosis of bipolar disorder.
I just found that it was really freeing to have the information. It made me really happy because I started to have a relationship with myself. And I think that's the best part.
You say you now live with bipolar and you don't suffer from it as much anymore. How did you go?
Okay, there's two big things to reflect on there. The first thing is the value of a diagnosis. When I was starting out as a psychiatry registrar, I kind of quickly got into this almost romanticized ideal that there's no such thing as a mental disorder or illness because everyone's got their own, every individual with the bipolar disorder, that's their own bipolar disorder. That's unique to them. That's not you can't just use what you use on person A and apply it to person B because they're so different in so many other ways that just calling them bipolar disorder can be too simplifying. And also we don't understand the etiology, so why are we diagnosing things best of observation? I had that thinking, but now I've definitely matured out of that phase, I guess, and can appreciate that although our diagnostic systems are imperfect, they're absolutely critical. They help on multiple fronts. They definitely help professional to professional communication. A bipolar disorder with someone who gets manic and psychotic, just in those words, can give you a good sense of a risk profile and what's needed in treatment in a brief number of words. But also it's useful for people to feel validated because the brain is very complicated and conscious experiences very, when someone's having these symptoms, they want to know why, and they want something to explain why am I acting, in this either abnormal or unhelpful or pathological way, because not having an answer is horrible, and so having a diagnosis can be really helpful for that. The truth is, though, in psychiatry, diagnoses can change retrospectively when you look at, someone who looks, depressed. Someone might be depressed for months and be called a unipolar depression, and then, 2 years later have a manic episode, and you realize the whole time actually it was a bipolar illness. So the diagnoses can change over time. And that's important to kind of stay a little bit malleable and understand that things can change, and realize that we just need to do the best, multifactorial treatment plan for the person. And I always say multifactorial or multimodal because complex problems have complex solutions, and it's biology and psychology and social interventions. And it's not just medication, right? It's a holistic approach that we need to take.
About learning how to live with bipolar as opposed to suffering from it.
Well, I do the necessary things, I see a therapist. I have tons of workbooks like a nerd. I write music. I try to take what's going on and turn it into something beautiful in the best way that I can.
That's the other thing that wasn't mentioned there, but probably the most critical thing I would say in managing a bipolar illness is a healthy sleep routine, and stable sleep. So a stable day and a stable night, and an excellent sleep hygiene. That's one of the most protective things around getting another manic episode. And also protective against depressive episodes too. Sleep is just a wonder drug when it comes to to everything. Actually, if you sleep well, you live longer. Your energy levels are better. Your performance in mental and physical activities are improved. Sleep's really important for people without bipolar, but people with bipolar, it's just critical. I want to go back to something she said earlier as well around I live with bipolar instead of suffer from bipolar. That's a beautiful line, and I like it. And it reminds me of a line from Ren where he says, who's another singer who I've done reaction videos to. And in the song Hi Ren, which I've done a reaction video to, there's a line that goes, there are no winners and losers when it comes to mental illness, only students and victims. You know, what a line. So if you are not a student, if you don't study your mind, your mental illness and how it behaves and responds and that kind of thing, then you become a victim to it. And so it's all about understanding what you need and doing that, which includes sleep.
Launched the multimedia company Wondermind, along with her mother Mandy Teffy and business partner Daniela Pearson. Its mission to destigmatize mental health crises.
I love the rare reminders that I've read about with your sticky notes.
It could be quotes, it can be something that I need to validate my feelings with, maybe something along the lines of like, today you are enough. I'll put it visually somewhere and I'll keep it there until that's like in my mind. How do I learn how to breathe my own breath again?
Yeah, this positive affirmation phenomena, I guess, is quite common. And if it works, that's great. I think it's, and I say this respectfully, but I think it's a superficial approach to improving psychopathology. So if you're feeling like you're not enough and that you are useless or something, and you're using sticky notes and positive affirmations to get by, great, keep doing that. Don't want to affect that. I use the word superficial in the sense that it's not getting to the root cause of the problem. So by itself, it's probably not enough. And I would support someone doing psychodynamic psychotherapy around reflecting why you have, staggered hopes, why you have hopelessness as a cognition. And does that relate to when you were a child, you weren't permitted, like you were punished for being curious or happy, or are you modeling someone, or digging to the kind of your foundational relationships, because every relationship we have is modeled off of our previous relationships. So that's called transference and countertransference. Like, we use our previous relationships to educate ourselves on how to manage future relationships. And that's why people who have been raised in traumatic situations will often go into traumatic relationships. Freud called it repetition compulsion, but it's really just the fact that we learnt unhealthy things in our childhood. And it's not the parents' fault either. They probably had similar things happen to them. So I'm not trying to assign blame to anyone here. I'm just saying that it's very helpful to understand why we think the way we think. And positive affirmations are lovely, helpful things for a lot of people, but it's also worth going into one layer deeper, the why.
Filming for My Mind and Me had to be stopped when Selena was hospitalized in 2018 following a nervous breakdown.
Take us to what brought you back to filming.
After she came out of the facility, I suddenly realized, wait a second, there's a really fascinating story, because she is just out and in recovery herself. And the fact that she's still very much the patient.
I needed to keep learning about it. I needed to take it day by day.
In this exclusive clip given to ABC, Selena dealing with severe anxiety triggered by a flare-up of lupus before her performance at the American Music Awards.
Right, so there we go. So first, nervous breakdown isn't a psychiatric term, but it kind of supports just someone being extremely overwhelmed, maybe having some issues in emotional regulation and feeling like they need respite. So I was thinking maybe, or maybe it was a manic episode or a depressive episode, who knows, she's got bipolar. But then they mentioned the lupus. So as I was saying before, it can affect the brain. But the steroids can also trigger, negative side effects. So if you had lupus causing a rash and you need to take steroids, the steroids can cause anxiety and agitation and insomnia. So it's tricky. Also, when I say steroids, I'm talking about things like prednisone, not things like steroids that bodybuilders use. That's anabolic steroids. These are a different kind of steroid.
I hadn't been on stage in over 2 years, and I still didn't know if I was ready. But what good is having a song if I was too scared to sing it?
I needed to lose you to love me.
She's always had issues performing and performing live. Her anxiety really flares up then, and that voice comes back that says, you suck. But it's all connected, the anxiety, the lupus, the live performance, and eyes being on her.
You said she's brave.
There's a fragility to her, but she can also soar. And she has that ability to really, in moments, surprise you by her power to kind of soar.
I think being vulnerable and open with people is a sign of bravery, and it's something I try and tell young men. Men in their 20s struggle with mental health doctors and psychologists and counselors. Do you know any man in their 20s that sees a psychiatrist or a psychologist? It's pretty rare. But actually, that's the real bravery, being able to admit you need help and get counseling and be open and vulnerable. So yeah, I think being more open is a sign of vulnerability. I also think the more vulnerable you can be with a friend, the deeper that relationship and friendship is. And relationships do better when you can be more open. So there you go, Selena Gomez talking about her mental health and her bipolar. It didn't really go into the signs and symptoms of bipolar. It talked more about depression and anxiety. It's important to kind of recognize how tricky sometimes diagnosis is between anxiety, depression, hypomania, and anxiety looking like hypomania. Obviously, if someone's anxious and agitated, they might feel like they're quite on edge. They can't sleep. They're manic, and they might call that a bipolar 2. It's just important to see a psychiatrist and to do a thorough assessment to really clarify the diagnosis, because the management of bipolar disorder and depression and anxiety are very different. And so accurate diagnosis is important. So I'm just saying that for you guys not to diagnose yourselves. But if you want to know more about mania and depression, please check out my other videos on the subject matter. I think this kind of content where celebrities talk about their mental illness is just critical for everyone to remember that it can happen to us, right? We're not special. And it can happen to me, right? And that's why I always tell myself when I see someone with a mental illness, and I've seen doctors with mental illnesses too, if this could be me. I just try and remember that. Anyway, that is it for this video. I wish you all a beautiful day full of love and connection, and make sure you call a friend and tell them you love them. And I'm going to go get a cup of tea. All right. Bye for now.